Okay, I came across a report in which Matt Hancock was pressed on the £3,000 pay rise that MPs are apparently going to get. I didn't watch the full report. I don't know if it was just like on MSN News. I didn't really click on it, but it made me think about this is just an issue that seems to crop up every now and again. MPs salaries, moral indignation, how dare they take more, and so on. There's a few things to consider with this. Firstly, very importantly, MPs don't set their own salary. It's set by an independent body. That's very important because I think people sometimes get the impression they just make up their own salary as they go along. That's not entirely true. Now, is there a case that MPs get paid too much? Maybe, maybe. I'm tempted to actually sort of be a bit radical and different and say, actually, they're under in a very demanding job, and it makes sense that they have an above average salary. But before I'm misunderstood with this, because I can already hear the follow up, what about nurses? What about police officers? What about soldiers? I think that it is disgraceful that nurses are only on circa 22 to 29,000 pounds, especially given the pressures that they face this year. I think soldiers who risk their lives, police officers who risk their lives, those sort of professions should all be paid a lot more. But how pay is determined isn't a black and white thing. It's often determined by secondary bodies, rather than directly. Um, so that's something that people need to understand. But something I have a problem with is when journalists, particularly top journalists, pontificate on this and they get into the gotcha style thing. Piers Morgan is a prime example. He loves doing this. Putting ministers on the spot. And my response is, okay, you're holding them to account. That's great. But what about your salary, Piers Morgan? I mean, this guy's a multimillionaire. And yes, he's the top of his field. Yes, he's, one of the biggest journalists in Britain in terms of a name. But consider this, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, his salary is £170,000. Give or take, it might be a bit more now, but it's certainly not exceeding 200,000. It's a lot of money, but when you consider he literally has the weight of a nation on his back, um, I would say that's definitely a justified amount. Um, Regular MPs don't have anywhere near the pressure that the Prime Minister does, but they are under pressure and under constant scrutiny. Government ministers are under pressure. I mean, to be fair to Matt Hancock, and I'm not saying that he's, you know, excelled in his role, but he has faced much more pressure than an average health minister would. I mean, what other health ministers had to deal with a pandemic on this scale? So it's all very well for you journalists to have this gotcha moment and say, "Oh, will you take a pay rise?" But these people are under enormous pressure. They're being scrutinized all the time. Every day the death toll rises. People want to blame the government without taking responsibility. So I just don't really share this moral indignation at MP salaries. Um, I don't think that there should be a pay rise at this time, not when there is an economic stagnation, not when millions of people are struggling. I mean, I'm certainly not speaking with a silver spoon. I'm not a wealthy guy, right? So you might think, why would I defend them? Because I'm not exactly in a stable position. I'm not wealthy, but I just understand that it isn't what it is. People are not looking at the whole picture. I mean, I can think of numerous professions that get paid more than politicians. Sports personalities, a lot of top academics. You take university vice chancellors, look at their salary. It's eye-watering, it really is. Um, a lot of media department heads, media executives, look at the fat cats in the BBC. I would argue they're far too excessively paid. Um, and it's nothing personal. I'm not. saying that they're bad people. Okay, take Zoe Ball, for example. Her salary, she was named as the top earner at the BBC. So much for women's pay, eh? But yeah, £1 million. That is her salary, just in excess of £1 million. Now, I'm sure she's a decent person. I've nothing against her as a person. I don't watch her show, but you cannot convince me that any show deserves a salary of £1 million a year. Um, Now, who has more responsibility, Zoe Ball or Boris Johnson? I think the answer is obvious. Yet she is on a salary 5 times higher. That's hardly, so where's the indignation over Zoe Ball's salary? Um, and again, I'm not making it personal. I'm not saying that she's a bad person or anything like that, but it's just an example of, when we're talking about salaries. Footballers, I mean, okay, people might say, oh, footballers get paid too much. I would argue that they don't get the sort of level of there seems to be a particular indignation about MP salaries, and I wonder is it because MPs are legislators, therefore they make decisions that impact other people's lives. But MPs, politicians don't even, I would say they probably don't even make the top five in terms of the bracket of top earners. That is media executives, sports personalities, celebrities. They all get paid more than MPs. Yet MPs, I would argue, have more responsibility. Um, So I'm not saying media executives don't have responsibility, they certainly do. But I would say definitely at the BBC, I mean, I find that particularly contentious. When BBC executives are getting ever bigger pay packets, yet they are pushing for people who don't pay the TV license to be fined and even jailed. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. So those journalists who are getting the little gotcha style moments and say, "Will you refuse a pay rise?" Why don't they ask themselves that question? Will they refuse a pay rise? I mean, the argument is okay, MPs will determine their own pay, but they can choose to not take it. They could give it to charity or something. Maybe they should, and I agree that the optics are bad. I don't think they should get a pay rise, but I just don't think it's fair to only focus on MPs. Um, there's a whole range of people who get paid more than MPs, and particularly top journalists. For them to point fingers just seems incredibly hypocritical when they're paid a lot more. Piers Morgan is an incredibly rich man, and okay, he's worked at it over years. I understand the argument, but it just seems a bit cynical for him to be pontificating on this when his own salary is a lot higher. Let me know your thoughts. I do think that nurses, soldiers, police officers, probably there could be a case made for teachers as well. Certainly frontline workers. I think they should be paid a lot more. Nurses in particular, given the pressures they have faced this year, I think they should be paid a lot more. Um, but then again, nurses, would say they're not in it for the pay. They're in it because they like caring for people. That's their motivation. My mother was a nurse for 40 years. She certainly didn't do it for the pay. So that's another factor. And you would think politicians would be in it for the right reasons. But I would say this, if someone wants to be wealthy, I wouldn't say politics is the most lucrative industry. People say they're only in it for themselves. Well, if someone wants to become rich, then they would become a footballer or a celebrity. You wouldn't become a politician. If you have a choice of a salary of 79,000, which is a very comfortable amount of money, maybe it's too much, but 79,000 versus 1 million, okay, think about that. I think in politics, the most lucrative thing is the after dinner speaking circuit, particularly with former prime ministers and government ministers. That can be very lucrative, and Tony Blair, Theresa May have become very wealthy as a result. David Cameron as well. That's lucrative, but actually sitting MPs is a different matter. Um, I'm not saying they get paid too little. I think they're paid probably about right. In my opinion, their salary isn't too much. It's certainly not too little. It's probably about right. People might disagree with that, but I would say, given the pressures that they face, given the responsibility they have, I would say it's probably about right. But this indignation about MP salaries, when people talk about that, I would say, well, okay, they shouldn't be paid more, but look at other salaries, look at media executives, look at university academics. And by the way, those university academics, they don't have anywhere near the sort of personal scrutiny that MPs have. So why is there not pressure on vice chancellors to explain their massive salaries? Why are they not put on the spot?